Our teacher, and her name is Ashley, okay, helped us. So in this case, we only have one teacher, okay? So we only have one teacher and it is known. And so that name, Ashley, it's a bit extra. It's not important to our understanding of the sentence. So we can put a comma before and comma after. Now, what do these commas mean? When we put a comma before and after a name, what that means is if you remove what is in between the commas, so if you remove Ashley, the sentence will be understood. So let's try an example. So we want to say she went to talk with my only sister, Ashley. Now, do we have to put, so this is a complete sentence, so we're just going to put a dot. Do we have to put a comma here or not? So the answer is yes, we're going to put a comma because there's only one sister. And so removing that part doesn't make the sentence bad. In fact, it's understood. You can also if you have like many sisters, and so you can say, for example, I went to talk to my sister, Ashley, about my other sisters. So in this case, you really can't put a comma here and there because it's very important, because now that you have other sisters, we really need to know which one. So Ashley is going to make that more specific, and you're going to have to keep it here. And so let's try another example of this. So for example, okay, I used to live in a small suburb. And so that suburb can have any name. It's like Virginia. So, and I was happy there. So the word Virginia isn't important to our discussion. So we're just going to put commas before and after it, because think of it, if you remove Virginia or whatever it is that's in between the commas, not only will the sentence be understandable, it'll be correct as well. Okay, so now that we've had that out of the way, we are going to be talking about clauses. So what is a clause? Okay, so a clause is a subject plus verb. Okay, so an independent clause, and we're going to use these words, dependent clause, is a clause that can stand alone. So it can stand alone in a sentence, meaning that it's composed of a subject and a verb and a complete thought. An example of an independent clause would be, I went to school. There's a subject, okay? There's a verb, And this is completely understandable. So there's also a complete dot. Now we go on to a dependent clause, and that's the second and only type of clauses that we have. Dependent clause, and that is a clause that, as you can see, that cannot stand alone. So how do you make a clause that cannot stand alone? It's pretty simple, actually. You bring an independent clause and you add a word that makes you ask why. So, for example, because he went to school. So, what happened here? Oh, there's a subject, there's a verb. Now, this part is completely understandable, okay? This is an independent clause. But because we have because, once you read that, you're going to ask, what happened because he went to school? So you're going to ask, and you're going to have a question mark. Now, when you do that, you have a dependent clause, okay? So what examples can we say about dependent clauses? Well, anything that starts or includes because, before, like, for example, before he arrived to school. What happened before he arrived to school? Was he hit by a bus? Was he happy? Because, before, after, as a result. And basically anything that makes you ask why, or it makes you ask, well, what next? So these are examples of dependent clauses. Now, why are we going over this? Because when we form sentences, we are going to be needing to learn what these things are. So let's go over the first example. There was a classmate of mine, and she failed a big project, and I helped her. So I'm going to say, because she failed in the project. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I helped her. So what do we say here? This is the first clause, okay? And if you can realize, this is a dependent clause. And this is the second clause. And if you can realize, this is completely understandable. It is independent. And do not let things like her, him, other pronouns get in the way of your understanding of independent and dependent. If you see anything like this, you have a dependent clause. That's the only grounds for saying that it is dependent. So this is completely independent. So what do? You put a comma. Now, why do I put a comma? Well, the rule says when I have a dependent clause coming, I put a comma when there's an independent clause coming after it. Now, does the same apply when I have, for example, independent clause and then dependent clause? Do I put a comma too? Do I put a comma here? So let's change this sentence. Let's say I helped her. Okay, so this is the independent clause, and we put that here. And then we're going to put that there. Yeah, excuse my writing. Because she failed the project. So do we need to put a comma here or not? Well, the answer is no, you do not put a comma here. So why do we not put a comma? Well, the reason is because the independent clause came first, no commas are going to separate it from the dependent clause. So because the dependent clause came here at the first, we put a comma. But because the dependent clause came second, we're not going to put a comma right over here. So let me write the rule in a better way. So if we have dependent clause, and then here we have independent clause, we will put a comma. If you have an independent clause coming first, and then a dependent clause, then you do not put a comma here. Okay? That was nice. Okay, now let's go over a different scenario where we're going to only deal with independent clauses. So we have an independent clause and an independent clause, and we're going to try to connect them together. So how are we going to connect them? So some people make the mistake of saying, oh, you just put them next to each other. That is wrong. Some people say, oh, you just put and. That is wrong. Some people say, oh, you just put comma. That is wrong. So what do? So let's take an example. You can succeed in this exam. And then we want to say, you will leave your school. So you have two options. First, you can succeed. If you don't succeed, you will leave. So how do we say it? Like, how do we put this? Now, if you say or, that is not enough, okay? Because this is an independent clause. This can stand alone. This is an independent clause. Now, the rules, what do the rules say? When we have two independent clauses standing next to each other, we must put a comma and a coordinating conjunction such as or here. Okay, so you're going to say comma or you will leave your school. So let's explore this rule and go over some examples so we fully understand this. So independent clause. Now, to connect them, we will need a comma. Now let's go over all the coordinating conjunctions here. Comma for, comma and, comma nor, comma but, comma or, comma yet. Now you get to choose which one, but you must put the comma before it. And you must make sure that this is independent and this is independent. And you must make sure they're independent clauses. So let's go over this example. And we have, for example, I will assist you, meaning help. And we want to say she will supervise us. So I want to help someone, and so someone else will supervise us, or supervise equals watch us. So we can just remove that, but yeah, it's a new word you can take. So what do we do here? These two can stand by each other. Which one do we choose? We will choose comma and she will supervise us. Okay, so let's go over another example. Yeah. Well, let me just write this down because we're going to use it. And then we're going to go over through some examples. Okay. Let's use a different color. Okay. So this is an interesting one. And so I never cheated. And then we want to say that Sarah never cheated too. So what are we going to say? We're going to use something interesting, and that is going to be different. So we're going to say, comma, nor did Sarah cheat. Okay? independent clause, independent clause. But this is a clause if you can't see it, but it is a clause because it's got a subject and verb, and it can stand by itself. So comma nor here is used because you're saying the negative. So you did not cheat, okay? And then Sarah did not cheat. Now we go to an interesting example of nor. So I never cheated. And then you want to say, nor did Sarah. So we're going to say did Sarah. So will you say nor, or will you say comma nor? Which one will you choose? This is answer choice A. This is answer choice B. Which one will you choose? The correct answer is going to be, drum roll, it is going to be option A. We're not going to be using comma nor because there is no verb. The verb cheat is not here. So I never cheated, nor did Sarah. What did Sarah do? The verb isn't here, so you don't put it. So that's an interesting case. Now we go over the but, comma, but conjunction. So he helped me. And he dislikes me. So we have an example of a very, very weird person that helps people but doesn't like them. So we're going to say this can wait. This can be alone. This is independent. This is independent. Okay. What do we put here? The answer is comma, but he dislikes me. Let's do another example. She is very smart. This is independent, but she didn't pass the test. Okay. Now we go over our final example in today's lesson, and it is comma yet. So let's go over this example here. So we can say, I helped her in her exam. She never thanked me. So what are you going to use? The correct answer is you are going to add comma yet. So yet she never thanked. Oh yeah. Yet she never thanked me. These are very important rules to follow by thumb because they just cover a lot of information that is expected of you when you write. Now, before we finish, there is an important example. Now, we know the first rule that we have taken today is a dependent clause, comma, and then independent clause, and then independent clause, and then dependent clause right away. And then we have independent clause applied a comma plus fanboys, and fanboys is an abbreviation for and N is for nor, B is for but, O is for or. Yeah, I didn't think we didn't cover or. Y is for yet. And so S doesn't mean anything, but you get the point. And then independent clause again. Yeah. So these are the rules, and they're very important. And I hope that you memorize them very well. One other final way, so one fourth way would be to apply the semicolon. So here's how the semicolon works. You put an independent colon, an independent clause, sorry, and then you put the semicolon followed by another independent clause. So, for example, she worked very hard to pass, and then you add a semicolon, and then you say her brother, or you can say, not, you know, like, to make this easier on you, her my you can say anything. So yeah, my parents helped her pass. So this can stand alone. This can stand alone, but they're connected by a semicolon. And because they're independent clauses, this can work. Now, there is another condition that is very important that I forgot to tell you, and it is that when you use the semicolon, it is better that the independent clauses here have some kind of connection. They either explain each other or they're a result of each other. They have some sort of connection involved. So you just can't put any two independent clauses out of the universe and put them. So for example, we want to say like she passed the exam by doing nothing. And then you want to explain how that happened. And then you say, oh, semicolon, her mom helped in the cheating of her daughter. So that's a very bad example. Don't do this, okay? But the independent clause explains the other, and this clause explains that. And that's when you can use the semicolon. And thank you.